You ever feel like not trying at your job and you just put in the bare minimum? Because that's what this video is. Inquisition and Aspect Warriors had me thinking, oh, this shouldn't be too long, I can get this done quick. As it turns out, no, I couldn't. So here's an easy video that's just what it says on the tin. Psykers are pretty dangerous, and I don't even mean they can do dangerous things. Sooner or later, at least for human Psykers, there's pretty decent odds that they're gonna end up possessed, or corrupted, or just explode into demons. No, I don't necessarily mean explode and leave behind a portal to the warp. That can certainly happen, but it's also possible they'll just explode into demons. Being a wizard probably isn't worth it for a human. But that being said, there are ways that can prevent this sort of thing, or at least delay it. Some of them are used by the Imperium, some of them are options that require either the help of other factions or just stealing from them, and some of them I'm just making up. And don't you worry, because rest assured, many of them are horrific crimes against humanity. In fact, I should tell you something right now. This isn't necessarily a way to let Psykers use their powers more safely, even if many of them do result in that. These are methods to make Psykers less of a problem for both themselves and the world around them. So if one day you get isekai'd into the 41st or 42nd or whatever it is millennium and have the misfortune to become a wizard, this video will tell you just what needs to be done to make sure you aren't a problem for everyone around you. But before we talk about Psykers, ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement. The most important one I've ever had, because this video was sponsored by Warhammer 40k Tacticus. We've got official legitimacy, lads, so listen up. Warhammer 40k Tacticus is where you go to scratch that 40k itch when you're on the go. You can jump into quick and fast-paced turn-based tactical battles at the push of a button, featuring not only countless units from the tabletop game, but over 50 legendary characters as well. And this is a 40k game, be assured. The factions are all given that level of 40k polish and presentation you should expect. And you can fight in anything from PvP to missions against AI to asynchronous co-op. Plenty of options to use your favorite fellows from the 41st millennium. All of this is free to play, so why not give it a try? You're a Warhammer fan, this is a Warhammer channel. We all know damn well what we spend on this hobby, but Tacticus is free. Ain't that just swell? And now's the perfect time to pick this game up, because the Machines of War event is running from the 10th to 15th of June. It brings a new 6 unit to the battlefield, of which there are 3 making their grand appearance now. There's the Ordnance Battery if you're a tried and true Guardsman fan, or a Forge Fiend for those of you with a more chaotic bent. But I'm partial to the Biovore because I find its ability to be funny. More Spore Mines. You can never have enough Spore Mines. Summon 3 Spore Mines at once, make a whole bunch of them get a free turn. All you will know is Spore Mines, and I find the mental image of the battle-hardened Space Marines of the Imperium drowning in Spore Mines to be incredibly funny. But while this is the perfect time to start playing, don't worry too much. The event will run again every 5 weeks with more new units to come. With all sorts of missions and units available from both the base game and Machines of War, there's no time like the present to check out Warhammer 40k Tacticus. With all the upgrades, missions, and more you can do, this game can keep you entertained for a long time, and it's available on iOS, Android, and Samsung devices. Download Tacticus today to lead your forces to victory in the 41st millennium. Now then, how to keep your wizard powers from killing everyone around you. We're going to start with methods that are outside of the Imperium. This is entirely because it's still a bit early in the video, and I don't want my suggestions that are abominations to demonetize me. For this, we turn to the Eldar. The Eldar, as you probably know, have a bit of a problem with Slaanesh. Entering the warp for more than a second at a time, as warp spiders do, is guaranteed death, and even then, some warp spiders just don't come back out when they teleport. It's so bad that they just can't use their true psychic potential, because using enough warp magic draws the attention of she who thirsts. Just about every Eldar has the potential to be an Ahriman-level Psyker, and if Eldrad wasn't locked behind these same limits, he could probably toss Magnus around like a ragdoll. I'm not exaggerating that. Eldrad could freeze time on a planet to hold a conversation, and calm down the warp itself so the Imperial Fist could safely reach Terra. That's what he can do with the caveat of Eldar having to take things easy if they don't want to be devoured. So with these limits placed upon them, the Eldar develop magical runes to help. That's right, dwarf fans, you're being beaten at your own game by the Space Elves. They're power limiters that an Eldar can get more of if they have the skill to use them. The more runes you have, the more power you can safely access from the warp. They glow brighter the more power you use, and if you use too much, they fizzle out. Not only is this a fantastic way to limit yourself, given that it both limits your power as well as shows you with light if you're going too far, you can also burn them out if needed. An Eldar can overload their runes and go all out if needed, briefly tapping into the full psychic potential of their species. species. I say briefly because when this is happening, death is already guaranteed for them. Such a psychic beacon they project will get them immediately devoured by Slaanesh, but if it's any consolation for them, they've probably turned the entire continent they were on into a barren wasteland before she gets them. And for a human Psyker, you don't have that problem. Sure, overloading your powers might get you generically damned instead of specifically damned by Slaanesh, but it would still be marginally safer for you to do so than an Eldar. And while I don't think it has a tabletop presence anymore, the ghost helm worn by Farseers used to make them functionally immune to warp perils. I think it was that it let them reroll the save for it, which was not a difficult check to make. So already the Eldar have a bevy of ways to ensure their souls are safe when they start chucking fireballs at people. There's also Spirit Stones, of course. To my knowledge, these don't actually make the Eldar more potent Psykers, or make using the warp any safer. But if you die when you're attuned to one, your soul goes into that thing instead of straight to Slaanesh. It's like a soul gem from the Elder Scrolls, only on purpose and less horrific. While it might not keep your Psyker powers from blowing up in your face, it would be a possible way to avoid your soul being devoured by all the things in your mind trying to drag you into hell. And while we're here, this one isn't something strictly speaking unique to the Eldar, but given that they're both incredibly long-lived and elves, they get better use out of this than anyone else. Meditation. No tricks, no fancy sacred techniques, even if those can help. Just calm your mind and focus only on yourself and your own powers. The Eldar get better usage out of this because you can be damn sure someone who can meditate for 1,000 years straight is going to be the most zen bastard to ever exist, but anyone can do it. Breathe in, breathe out, block out the voices in the back of your mind eternally screaming for you to sell your soul to chaos, and cast some small spells. Just find a quiet room and take some deep breaths. There are infinitely more reliable methods than this one, such as the Eldar's own ghost helms and whatnot, but this does help. The issues with getting the Eldar ways of doing things is that they aren't just going to want to give them to a random human Psyker. Ghost helms aren't given to every Eldar on a battlefield, just Farseers, and runic armor is a similar thing. Only their Psyker units proper are going to make any usage of it. Guardians and aspect warriors are only marching to war with more standard mesh armor or aspect armor. The only thing you can expect to find on every Eldar is their Spirit Stone, and taking that from them is no easy task. You'll almost certainly have to kill them to get it, and if you do, that means their soul is going into it instead of yours at a future date. There's not a lot of room in those things, so if that happens, all you'll functionally get for your trouble is a magic rock you can use as a desk ornament. You can draw power from it if you want, but we're trying to make things safe for you here. Doing that will very likely draw the attention of every warp predator around, and for all you know, the Eldar soul within the Soul Stone might throw psychic hands with you as well. And even if they had an abundance of all the things I've listed, they probably wouldn't just give them to you. The Eldar aren't exactly the biggest fans of humanity, or at least the Imperium, which functionally is humanity, so they don't hand these things out like candy. Even learning some of their fancy meditation techniques would already be a sign of you being immensely favored for a human in their eyes. Getting runes, ghost helms, or spirit stones is well and truly out of the question. But they are still possible ways to keep your soul safe, and it's a big galaxy out there. Wander around enough and you can probably find the corpse of a Farseer to loot, or maybe buy some from some less than scrupulous sources. Assuming you had something they want and they don't just kidnap you for funsies, the Dark Eldar would probably sell you these things. Speaking of the Dark Eldar, there's another way to keep your Psyker powers under control. Go hide in the webway. Now this one is a lot more iffy in terms of how effective it is, but it's still valid enough. The Emperor certainly thought so because his master plan seemed to be shoving all of humanity into the damn thing. The Dark Eldar weren't sucked into Slaanesh with the rest of their former empire because they were hiding in the webway, and additionally, the webway has a variety of defenses to keep chaos out. It vents itself back into real space, and it also has guardians within it to keep itself safe. It also has the Black Library in it, so in terms of keeping out any threats, it's hard to do better than the Eldar Custodes and the single remaining active god they have. It also needs to be breached by demons if they want to actually do anything in there, so they need to put in the work to get at you. I imagine it works as a sort of shield around your soul. Slaanesh does slowly drain the Dark Eldar, it's true, but it's like putting a cork in a leaky faucet. Some soul juice is still getting drained away, but far slower than it would be otherwise. Or maybe being layered in bubble wrap is a better comparison. For a normal human Psyker, I imagine it'd be even more effective, since no god has an inherent claim on human souls like Slaanesh does to the Eldar. Of course, to use the webway in this method, you need to actually get into the webway, which is easier said than done. Most of the gates that are consistently active are guarded either by the Craftworlders and Exodites, who will kill you, or the Dark Eldar, who will make you wish they killed you. Inactive ones, of course, need to be turned on, which probably requires an Eldar Psyker, and see the above points for why that's problematic. They're probably even less likely to do this for you than give you a rune or a ghost helm, because letting you into the webway means you have the potential to just randomly show up on a craft world, and they'd really rather you didn't do that. It's also far from 100% safe. I have no idea what the Emperor planned to actually do about keeping the webway secure, because this thing is falling apart more and more as time goes on. Even if the parts you're in are safe, it can be breached somewhere down the road, and you're still in danger, if not as immediately. And there's a whole load of people with a vested interest in doing just that. Demons do it all the time, but Ahriman in particular really wants to get at the Black Library. The Necrons can also rip their way into it to travel, so that's another problem you'll have to deal with. And of course the Harlequins. They're likely not to look too fondly at some random schmuck pissing about in their backyard. In terms of keeping you safe as a Psyker, I wager you're probably safer in the webway than real space. In terms of just being safe as a person, probably not worth it. There's enough things in there, or can get in there, that it'd see you dead that'd make it pretty unlikely you'd live long enough to master your powers. It also vents excess energies back into the Materium, so if you're really unlucky, you might find yourself blasted back into reality in some incredibly haunted location. We're gonna go through all the Xenos methods of keeping people safe first while we're at it. So on that topic, how do the Necrons have ways to keep Psykers safe? Well, it all lies with one miraculous substance the Necrons are the main holders of: Blackstone. Blackstone is something that a whole load of Necron buildings are made out of, chiefly among them for our purposes, the Necron pylons. Those things are quite handy, because the ones that were left on Cadia after Abaddon had the rest destroyed were enough to start closing the Eye of Terror on their own, and they affect pretty much every form of psychic phenomena. Saint Celestine herself started losing her powers mid-fight with Abaddon when they were activated, and saintly miracles and powers that come from the Emperor tend to be noticeably different from normal war powers. One easy way to stay safe is just to turn one of those things on. You're not only safe from your own literal inner demons, but safe from the ones coming from the outside as well. And the Necrons can build more of them, so it's not like with Cadia going to hell in a handbasket it's impossible to find the things. Even without being used to construct additional pylons, Blackstone can still function as a method of calming the warp as well as nullifying psychic powers, so if you find enough of the stuff to make some jewelry out of, you're good to go. Unless I'm mistaken, it can also be used to amplify one's psychic powers, so if things go really wrong, you can supercharge your magic for a bit to get out of dodge. And while this has the same caveats as the Eldar methods did, and probably requires you to get in good with the Necrons, that's honestly a far easier task than it is to make friends with the Eldar. Some Necron dynasties want to rule over human vassals, so if you manage to find one of those, you'll likely be set when it comes to keeping yourself safe from your overactive soul. Given their dislike of the warp, if they find out you're a Psyker, they may damn well make you wear some Blackstone. They might also just shoot you, but I think that's a gamble worth taking. Of course, you'll be selling your freedom to Xenos to do this, but you didn't have freedom in 40k to begin with. No one in the Imperium has freedom. All you're really doing is switching which faction you're toiling away in a factory for. And yeah, you might also end up near one of the dynasties that still has the Space Terminator thing going for it, in which case you are very dead, but hey, again, nothing spices up life like gambling for yours, so it's worth a shot. And now we're getting to the Imperial methods, as well as the ones I came up with myself. So now we're getting into the territory of horrific atrocities that'll only technically keep you and those around you safe from yourself. One of the less horrible ones is just hanging around a blank. Blanks of sufficient strength, such as Kane's good pal Jurgen, are capable of blocking out psychic powers around them. For that matter, anything remotely psychic can be completely disrupted by their presence. Demons can barely touch them, at least directly, and even the Tyranid hive mind can be disrupted. Now granted, as a Psyker you will likely suffer horrible discomfort at best and constant seizures at worst, but hey, your soul's not getting chowed down on by demons, that's something to be happy with. Another method is to become a sanctioned Psyker. These are, as the name implies, Psykers officially allowed to exist by the Imperium. They're covered in holy symbols of the Emperor to ward away demons, which incidentally is a good idea regardless, and trained in how to use their powers relatively safely. This is a less effective way of safeguarding your soul than the Eldar equivalents of runes and meditation. The Eldar are just better at psychic stuff, so their 99.9% effective methods are more like a 30 to 40% success rate here. But it is better than being completely untrained when it comes to keeping yourself safe. Even if we assume it is entirely a placebo sort of thing, in 40k, placebos work. I don't mean like they do in real life where you take a sugar pill and you get over a cold faster, it's all belief, and belief in this setting is tangible. So hey, you're setting yourself up to have even less freedom than the average Imperial since you'll be constantly monitored and used as a weapon, but you will at least be somewhat safer this way. I know the Founding Fathers might be unhappy with me for saying it, but give me liberty or give me death is a lot harder of a principle to stand by when demons are actively hoping you get all the liberty you want so they can use your body like a sock puppet and or fleshlight. This next method is arguably the most brutal of all of them. Sign yourself up for an inquisitorial black ship and go get eaten by the Emperor. It's a horrific process that is said to be one of, if not the worst pain in all this setting. Your soul becomes a battery for the Emperor, and he is ever hungry for more. Depending on what happens during it, you either become one with the Emperor himself or your soul just fades into nothingness. Those are the only downsides, but as you can see, they're not exactly small downsides. So what are the upsides? Well, on the way to Terra, the ship has a Sister of Silence on it to keep the Psykers aboard safe. No mishaps are going to happen because they're both incredibly strong blanks and incredibly strong warriors. Even in a worst case scenario where demons make it aboard, the Sister will ensure it very swiftly dies. And as far as I understand the process, while waiting to be plugged into the Golden Throne, the Psyker in question actually lives fairly comfortably. They aren't tortured or anything, they just kinda hang around and wait for the day they join Big E. Fed good food, kept as comfortable as you can hope for on the mess of a planet Terra is, so your soul won't be eaten by demons, and for at least a little while, you're living good. Of course, again, you are getting your very essence sandblasted away as you slowly either fade into nothingness or join your god in eternal torment, so if I were you, I'd at least consider some other options first. I also might be wrong about them living comfortably, because I not only can't remember where I read that, but I know for a fact it wasn't an official source. So only throw those dice if you're really confident and or desperate. Now I have some options I've come up with that are, shall we say, last resorts to actually go through with for the most part. For example, you can just decide to blow your head off. Your soul can't be damned by the demons clawing at your brain if you blow it out of your skull first. I don't need to explain why this one should be a last resort because, you know, suicide. But it's there. It's an option. For a slightly less horrible option, just drug yourself into a coma for all time. I don't even mean Slanesh hedonism drugs. Just keep yourself in a permanent anesthetic coma, 0 brain activity levels. I'm sure if a demon really tried, they could mess with you in the coma, but they'd have to go out of their way, I imagine, and at that point, you're damned regardless of what you do. The easiest way, of course, and perhaps the only one I've come up with that isn't horrible, is to not use your Psyker powers. Using them is what puts you in the most danger, so if you just don't do that, you're only moderately more at risk of possession or demon explosion than a normal person is. The voices probably won't go away, but they'll stay as whispers telling you to murder your boss and eat him, instead of shouts to murder your boss and eat him. Much easier to ignore. You could even indoctrinate yourself to think of nothing but the Emperor and other holy things at all possible times. Sure, this is horrific, but the word indoctrination is used so frequently in 40k that it just doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Seriously though, quick side tangent, imagine how horrifically that alone would be portrayed anywhere else. It's standard operating procedure to have Space Marines indoctrinated as part of their training. And in the Death Watch, they go even further. They'll strap you to a chair and force you to constantly watch footage and hear recordings of Space Marines being killed by Xenos until the very idea of a Tau is enough to send them into a blood rage. If something like that was happening in Halo or almost any other setting, that would be a key feature of whatever is being described. The brainwashing of entire groups of people would on its own be enough to get all the protagonists outraged at the sheer awfulness of it. And yet in 40k it's like a sentence whenever it's brought up, barely worth a passing mention. Anyway, I just thought that was neat. Back to the actual topic. There are ways to genetically modify yourself to dim your very soul, which is something of an iffy ground for already existing Psykers. The Leagues of Zoltan did this very thing, although they're an odd bunch given that they're all clones. The clone skins they use tamper with their genetics to such an extent that their souls shine more dimly within the warp. Of course, there's a few immediate hurdles. You of course need to get this tech from the Votan, but at least a couple of them would probably be willing to perform the procedure, or whatever it is done for a price. Not tell you how it works, but do it for you. The main issues I can imagine are more to do with the fact that as a Psyker, there's no telling how this will affect you. To my knowledge, this sort of thing hasn't been done with standard humans, and for all I know, it could require an entirely new life form for the process to work. Your cloned kids might be safe and secure, but who knows if it'll work on you. And tampering with the souls of anyone, let alone Psykers, is the sort of thing that leads to problems. Even just shutting down the warp as blanks do drives Psykers mad. Undertaking an operation that darkens their soul might leave them permanently catatonic. It's technically mission success, but you probably won't be celebrating. Maybe see if you can't grab some of the tools their Grimnir Psykers use. The League's technology is closer to the Dark Age of humanity than anything the Imperium has, so for all we know, looting around their stuff will find you some miracle cure or shield or whatever you want. Also, another unrelated tangent, but naming their Psykers Grimnir is an atrocity. Implying that the proud dwarf slayer god should be associated with wizards even in name alone is elf nonsense of the highest degree and worthy of an entire chapter in the book. Might I also recommend turning yourself into a servitor? Sure, you're a total slave to the Mechanicus, lose your very personality, and a very small part of yourself might be trapped inside you, screaming in agony and desperation for someone, anyone, to let you out or kill you and grant you a release that will never come, stuck inside your own mind for potentially decades or centuries, watching as bits and pieces of you are chopped away and replaced with machinery, unable to cry for help as the devotees of the Omnissiah turn you into a mockery of both man and machine. But hey, demons probably aren't an issue for you anymore. Progress. And my final method is to just give up and submit yourself to Khorne. And before anyone starts going on about how Khorne hates Psykers, yes, I am aware, but consider Azariah Kairos. He was a Psyker, and Khorne didn't instantly turn him to ash when he was dedicating himself to him. Get yourself a brass collar to dampen your psychic power and go nuts. Are you safe? Not at all. Are you still a danger to everyone around you? More so now than ever. But when it comes to your psychic powers, the danger you represent has been completely nullified. And this is my list of ways to not get devoured by the Chaos Gods if you were a Psyker. I'm sure there's more, but those are the easiest ones I could think of. I mean, seriously, it can't be that hard to get yourself killed in Warhammer if nothing else. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the warp to my Psyker powers, enabling all the crap I get up to here. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. Psyker, I barely know her. God, funniest joke on the planet right there. Does a word end in an sound? Instant comedy gold, 0 effort required. Can you believe people say that writing is difficult? Must be a lot harder when you aren't a complete and utter fucking hack.